Welcome back to This Week, where we elevate voices fighting for faith, family, and common sense in California politics. Today's guests are Benito Benny Bernal and his wife, Mary Ann Bernal, a power couple rooted in grassroots activism and bold conservative values. Benny is a longtime Republican candidate who's run for Congress in California's 29th District and for LA City Council. A former school bus driver and LAUSD supervisor by trade, he spent decades working with youth, protecting parental rights, and sounding the alarm on border security and veteran care. Mary Ann is a dedicated civic voice in her own right. She co-hosts a weekly political radio show with David Hernandez, chair of the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club. Known for her sharp takes on local government, homelessness, and Latino family values, Mary Ann has become a respected commentator and organizer in LA's conservative circles. Together, the Bernals represent a working-class, God-honoring resistance to California's political machine. And they're here to share their journey, their convictions, and their mission. Welcome, guys.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys taking the time to come out here and meet me, considering everything is happening in LA right now. It's not easy to get around.
You're right. It's not easy, but you know what? It's something that somebody has to do.
Yeah.
I'm thankful that we have individuals like yourself, my wife also, who, it takes courage to do what we do in this type of an atmosphere. But when you have faith, and especially when you have faith in the Most High, you know that you're not alone. You're not walking alone. And, as a former strategist and organizer for the Latino Democratic Party and the unions, I've been on both sides of the aisles. I should say all three sides, because you have the Democrats, the Republicans, and then you have the unions.
Yeah.
Of course, the independents. But all the money and the power is there. But it is an honor to be here on your show. And I'm thankful that, I have the opportunity to be with my wife here.
Well, thank you so much. Well, let's dive into, you just mentioned you used to work for the Democrat Party. So tell me a little bit about that, and then when the shift happened and what caused it.
Okay, so we go back. I mean, I was born and raised as a Catholic, now I'm a born-again Christian, also a Democrat, because, you're Hispanic. You're supposed to be a Democrat and a Catholic, right? That's how we were raised. Grew up in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. And, grew up in the whole raza movement, my older brothers and sisters. At age 6, every summer, my dad, last day of school, the last baseball game, we'd go off to Stockton, Lower Modesto, pick cucumbers. We worked in the fields. This was still going on during the Chavez movement. So some of my other older siblings were involved in the Cesar Chavez movement. And it's interesting because today, with the immigration issue that's going on, people talk about, what Chavez would be rolling in his grave. Yeah, he'd be rolling in his grave because he did not support illegal migration.
That's such a good point, because I heard that just the other day. He was totally against it.
Totally against it, and I'm going to tell you why. And then I'll get back into the history of the Chicano movement.
Yeah.
Because when we were working in the fields, my dad, they wouldn't give you cash. They would either give you a ticket for every bucket that we used to pick cucumbers.
Yeah.
So every bucket that we filled, you walk down, you dump it in, they give you a ticket. Or we had a ticket stub that was connected to us, and they would just punch it, right? Like a punch hole. Yeah, I was 6 years old doing it, so they would give me 5 punches when I'd go up there. But the reality is that they were only paying the pickers 25 cents per bucket. When Chavez and everybody was saying across everywhere else was 50 cents per bucket. So we're already being, they're cutting the cost of our work, of the pay that we should receive. And that's why Chavez was against it, is because illegal immigrants are willing to come into our country and do the work. We're, as first and second generation Americans of Hispanic descent or Mexican descent, we're the ones that are paying the price. So Chavez was totally against it, and when I hear people say, try to use Chavez's name in this particular issue, no, you're absolutely wrong. He was against it for that reason, but also he was also trying to protect the illegal immigrant workers, because what was happening was the property owner would come out like every 2 weeks, and you'd turn in your tickets, and he would give you cash. So when he would show up, everybody would line up, and you'd have about 200 workers there, right? If not more.
Yeah.
And who would show up? Immigration. So they would run. Everybody would leave. That was illegal. And I remember the first time it happened, I'm like, Dad, am I supposed to run? No, we're okay. We're okay,
Yeah.
But he was also trying to protect them, because the property owners here, and even till this day, people who hire illegal immigrants are taking advantage of the situation.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, it's hurting us. Now, let's go back to the Democratic Party. So, yes, I was a Democrat. And, we always had the Chicano movement. They'll blame the white man for the failures of our communities, everything that's going on, the gang violence, teenage dropout, teenage pregnancy, illegal immigration, and the abuse in the welfare system. Those were the 5 issues that we were dealing with. So we decided, well, let's build our own Latino political machine. And you're talking, you got Villaraigosa, Padilla, Cardenas, you got all the power names right now that are there. I grew up with a lot of these guys, mentored them. They were more educated. I was more of the DJ, the class president, doing my stuff. I was a community guy working with the gang prevention intervention. They wanted to go on to college. So, well, you guys go on to college. It was a 20 to a 24-year plan. Think about this. 24-year plan. It was to run for every level of government, including the courts, and then run for the presidency in 2028.
Yeah.
So the plan is still in effect.
Yeah.
So the plan was to do all of that. But meanwhile, we were doing it because we were going to change the quality of life that we were dealing with in the lower income minority communities. So time goes by, a few years go by, we get people elected to every level of government. We have a private meeting in a room not much bigger than this. And there was probably about 10 of us, 11 of us. One man that controls them all. One man, he's a developer and a lobbyist. His name is James. So we're all standing there, sitting down, and then I asked a question. I said, gentlemen, we said we're going to put this plan together, run for office, in the presidency in 2028, and the 5 issues that I pointed out to you. I said, we always blame the white man, but now it's us. We're all in these positions, and things have gotten worse.
Yeah.
So what is the deal? None of them would even look at me. They literally put their hands between their legs, and the one man that controls them all, he says, Benny, let me ask you 3 questions. At this time, I'll get into that. So he goes, let me ask you 3 questions. Number 1, he says, if we solve all these issues you're talking about, gang violence, teeny dropout, teeny pregnancy, illegal migration, and the abuse of the welfare system, he goes, and what issues will our candidates run on the next time they run for office? He goes, and number 2.
Interesting. Yeah.
Do you realize how much money comes into our city and our states, nonprofit organizations? He says, because of the problems we're dealing with. Because that money's a revolving door, and I'm going to get into that if you want to after. And
100%. I want to get into that. But keep going. I don't want to interrupt you.
And then number 3, because I was an elected union vice president for SEIU, not appointed. Many of these elected leaders today are appointed by the international. I was elected by the membership. He goes, do you realize how many jobs it creates? So I looked at him, and I looked at all of them, and none of them would look at me. And I said, so what you're telling me is that we're going to allow our kids to keep killing each other. We're going to allow our young girls to keep dropping out, depending on the welfare system, destroying the nuclear family, because there's money to be made. And he just crossed his arms. And I said, okay, I'll tell you what, from this day forward, I'm going to do everything I can to expose you guys. And that was back in 2000, probably 2004, somewhere around there. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but I've been trying to expose them ever since, brother. And unfortunately, a lot of my messages fell on deaf ears. So it was in 2016 where I finally, in prayer, I said, Lord, what am I doing here? You still got me in this party. I'm banging my head up against the wall. We're not moving. We're going in the wrong direction. And he had told me, you're there because you're educating the future leaders of that party. So he was going to use them to create a division within their own party. So then I could literally hear his voice run for Congress in 2016. That's when I ran as a Democrat against Tony Cardenas. Tony Cardenas was the head of the snake as we know him. So here I am running for Congress, supporting who was my presidential candidate? Donald Trump. Wow. And I'm a leader in the unions and a leader in Democratic because
So you ran as a Democrat supporting Trump?
Supporting Trump. And I actually got invited to the convention through David Hernandez, which I wasn't supposed to be in there, but I was allowed. And I'm sitting at the table with all the Republican leaders. And they're looking at my platform. They said, oh, we need to appoint you to this committee, that committee. Then David says, you can't. He's a Democrat. So half of them got up and walked away. And I said, see, that's the problem with the parties, is that if you're not a part of the party, then you're the enemy.
Yeah.
I said, but yet you sat at this table because you looked at my platform. My platform is more conservative than most of you Republicans. And many Democrats had a lot of the same platform, very conservative. I go, why? So then one of them, the ones that had stayed there, one of the elderly men, he says, well, so Benny, who do you think we should endorse as a presidential candidate? And I held out my platform.
Yeah.
I said, whose platform looks like that? And then I held out Donald Trump's.
Yeah.
I said, there it is.
Yeah.
I said, see, right now, I know their plan. Their plan is to take God out of the picture, destroy the nuclear family, come after the innocence of our children, and they're Marxists. Yeah. They want to destroy this country. I said, the only level of government they do not control is the Supreme Court. So if we don't get Trump elected, because Trump is going to appoint the next 3 Supreme Court, at least 3. Yeah. I go, we're in trouble. This country is done. And we prayed about it, brother. And a lot of people of faith within the Democratic Party supported our movement and went behind Donald Trump in 2016.
Wow. Well, thank God for that. That's such a huge level of corruption. And that's the kind of thing that you usually, when you hear it in conversations, you usually hear it in a speculative sense,
Yes.
right? You rarely hear something that's your personal experience, that you were in the room telling, you saw this unfold, and it confirms so much of what people think about government, right? That they don't actually, a lot of our elected officials may go into it with good intentions, but they get corrupted by the money, by the power, by the influence, and by the desire of just, having that security, extending that security, right? It's really unfortunate because they're doing it at the cost of the lives of the children that are going to come and inherit this country.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And the saddest part about it is that they think they're part of that elite group. They're not. They're just puppets. They're being used at a time where the elites are using them to do what? One world order. We know what they're coming after.
Yeah, that's what it all goes to, really, when you really look at like the really deep part of it is the New World Order. And it's basically allowing people that are billionaire elitists like Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, the WHO, the UN, all these organizations basically that are unelected, that want to take over basically everywhere, and be able to control everybody. And I think that's what people are not seeing. We're very short-sighted. All we see is that, we have immigrants that have come into our country, and they're good people. But they don't see the fact that there's a lot of bad people coming in too. And it only takes a few bad people to do something horrific. Yeah. People want to look at, maybe the majority are good. Unfortunately, the majority they're kind of silent a lot. They don't take a stand. We are the majority, but we act like we are the minority, because the people that have the biggest mouths and they're willing to take action are usually the people that are the criminals. And that's what a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah. I think it's, you touched on a point about the New World Order, this globalist agenda that also is coming from the World Economic Forum.
Yes, sir.
And all of the, it's profoundly evil. It reminds me of, those sound bites that you hear where they talk about, like, you will own nothing and be happy.
Yes.
Right. And how they're,
be in a box and be content.
Exactly. I think it's important that you mentioned faith, because I think that this ties into it's spiritual warfare at the end of the day.
Yes, it is. Yeah, that I just went on. We have a group text with leaders throughout the state of California, state leaders. And, we're in this situation because the leadership has failed in both parties, and people often ask me, like, why? I mean, what's going on? I started talking about this invasion going back to probably in 2016 when I was leaving the Democratic Party. I started talking about there's going to be an invasion that's going to take place across the border. Hey, what do you mean? What do you mean? People are just, no, they're going to open these borders. And you want to know why? Because first and second generation, Americans, whether it be Mexican descent, Salvadorian, whatever, now we understand the American life. We understand the American dream that we're trying to achieve. We've become educated on the laws, on how things are supposed to work in America. And then we're seeing our Latino leaders pushing policies that are totally against our values and everything that we stand for. Yeah. So as the years went on, we became educated on the way of living as an American, the laws and policies, and we walked away from the Democratic Party. So they started seeing their voter base just diminish.
Shrink, yeah.
So what other option did they have? And I told people, they're going to try to they're going to try to reduce felonies to misdemeanors so that they can try to get some of these individuals to vote, open borders, bring them all in, California ID, driver's license for California, people register to vote. You're going to have millions of illegal voters in the United States. Came to be.
Yeah, and it's so interesting you say that, because not only did the millions come in, but I think it was last week that Newsom, or it was a state assembly, were considering a measure that they were going to allow illegal immigrants to participate, not necessarily vote, but to participate, like count votes or
yes, I saw that. I did see that. You know what? A lot of these people are voting, and this is their voting base. Yeah. And so without these illegals being here, they don't have a voting base, because California is mostly red.
Yeah.
And, the problem is in people, we're starting to talk about it now, but the problem is the establishment in our party is corrupt, and people don't like to talk about it. Until we start putting it out there, we are not going to address it. And so we have a California GOP who was trying to change our platform, basically almost mimicking the Democratic platform.
About 2 years ago, right?
Yes. Yeah, a little
was
over
it
2
about
years
2
ago.
years ago? Basically, not defending the nuclear family, changing, what is our
No longer talking about the social issues,
yeah,
you know?
the LGBT, all of that,
Pro-life.
Yeah, the pro-life. And so, we have people at the very top that are, that they're not working with the grassroots. And we consider ourselves the grassroots. And so we ran through the LAHRC, we ran 10 candidates. And my husband was included in that. And so with these 10 candidates, we did not get an ounce of help from the California GOP, the LA GOP. There was nobody. They sent nobody to help canvass. They sent nobody to help, do phone calls. They helped with no money, no raising of money. They didn't even make a phone call of advice. Nothing. Okay, you're talking about 10 candidates.
Yeah.
And this is really, really important because not only did they not help our candidates, many times they were leaving positions, seats unchallenged, completely unchallenged. In fact, if Benny wouldn't have ran, his seat would have been unchallenged. You basically would have had a leftist Democrat and a socialist Democrat
running against each other, basically.
That's what would have ran.
Same side of the coin.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's a 26 to 1, 26 plus district,
Yes. And so my husband ended up running at the very last minute. It was never a plan to run. It was just like what was happening to the children was so dire with the transgendering. Nothing about the gays, nothing about hating anybody. We all have family and friends. If you're born and raised here in California, everybody has family and friends in the LGBT community. And they've been there forever. There's always been, gays in the school. They've been there forever. And it's never been a problem. The problem became when they started transitioning children. And they started transitioning them at such a young age. And not just that, they started taking the parental rights and actually passing bills, making it so that parents couldn't even defend their children.
It was a bill that Newsom signed into law last year.
Well, there's AB 665 is one of the worst bills. And anyways, his opponent, Luz Rivas, she voted for all of those with glee. Okay.
Wow.
And so when we're talking about what was happening, it was like he didn't really want to run. I didn't really want him to run. But as Christians and the people of faith, we cannot stay silent any longer. We are a big majority. We have a big voting bloc. Half of all Christians don't vote. Could you imagine if they all went out and voted and they represent God? What they don't understand is that we are supposed to be representing the Lord. We're supposed to be bringing the Lord's value into our communities. And when we are just pretending all we do is just go to church on Sunday and maybe read a Bible scripture and that's all that's asked of us, that's wrong. It's not right. Because we are, what do they say? Faith without works is dead. It says it in the Bible. So if you are not doing some work, some action, then you're not doing what the Lord is commanding you to be doing.
So I see, I like that point because I do see that there's a Christian awakening happening.
Oh, yes.
There are a lot of Christians that are realizing just how far things have gotten and that they can't sit on the sidelines anymore. At what point do we see things actually start turning around? Is this like a mid to long-term plan? Because a lot of what we're pushed is everybody wants to see immediate results. But realistically, what is this, like a 5 to 10 year thing? Like how long?
It's hard to answer that question because I look at things spiritually. I was born, like I said, I was raised a Catholic, but I went to church on Sundays. I never read the Word of God. I just went to church. I'd dump money in there and pay my indulgences and go through the process. And I thought I was good. But when I studied the Word of God, going back, this is how I became a Christian, was when I was leaving the Democratic Party. I'll tie back into that. First, I was offered, when I had that little backroom deal I was telling you about, first I was offered $2 million to walk away. And you're talking about over 20 years ago. $2 million, turn around, Benny, walk away, just leave us alone. I said, I refuse to do that. And the reason why is because just before that, there was death threats also on my children because I refused to take the money. There was death threats on my children and on myself. That's what dropped me to my knees to cry out to God. If you're real, I need your help. He answered my prayers. He literally, a congressman from D.C. called me. I understand you need some help. Who are you? You know, and I saw
out of the blue.
Yeah, out of the blue, and I saw how the Holy Spirit started to work. So that's what changed my life. But first, they try to buy you, then it's a death threats, right? But I want to tie that into what my wife was talking about when it comes to the leadership. You have, like right now, we have Roxanne. You know, Roxanne got into the politics. She's the LAGOP chair. So she got into politics with David. You know, we took her out. We got her to run for office, so on and so forth. She was a soccer mom, you know, and she's not bilingual. So I was running for Congress. That's when I was running for Congress in 16. I would take her with me and I would interpret for her, you know, interpret everything that she had to say. And what was her biggest complaint? Her biggest complaint was that, why doesn't the party help us? Why doesn't the party help grassroots candidates? Yeah. That's what she was yelling and screaming. Great. Keep talking to me because you're right. Yeah. At least the party in the past used to send out a door hanger of all the endorsed candidates and send it out, put it on everybody's door. They didn't even do that this election. But I want to tie that into why it's important. So now she's the LAGOP chair. And what is she doing? She's not even having meetings. How do you plan and organize if you don't even have meetings? You know, we love Roxanne. We want her to have success, the LAGOP and the COGOP with Corinne, but they got to be willing to work with the grassroots candidate. And this is why I'm going to make that point. In 2016, when I ran, I probably got about 25,000 votes. There's only like 55,000 registered Republicans, about almost 300,000 Democrats. It's a pretty bad blue district, right? Yeah. So 2016 I run, 2018 I run, and then I run again in 2024. This time, I didn't want to run, brother. Honestly, we were having the spiritual battle. She kept telling me the kids, and I said, baby, I'm tired. I'm tired physically, mentally. I was dealing with the pain in my stomach for about 12 years. Got to the point where my stomach just got bloated. I ended up in the emergency. Wow. Doctor said, you're lucky you came. Had I not gone, I probably wouldn't have made it to see the next day. But I knew, I didn't realize then it was a hand of God that says, you're not going to listen to me? I'm going to make you listen to me. Yeah. But he was also working on the doctor because he told me what happened was they had to do a pretty serious surgery on me, which was I was going to need a lot of pain pills coming out of the surgery. But the voice of God, when I walked into that surgery room, I saw all the instruments. It scared me, literally scared me. And I don't scare easy. And I just heard the voice of God said, you're going to be okay. Just when you get out of it, tell the doctor you want no pain meds. Yeah. You're going to be a miracle. I'm going to get you back out there to fight for the children because you're going to run for Congress. You're going to run for Congress. You're going to fight for my kids, and I'm going to take the head of the snake out. The head of the snake, as we know, is Tony Cardenas. So that first night, you know, I wake up. I tell the doctor, no, they just gave me a Tylenol 800. I needed no pain pills. The doctors are freaking out, but God was also working through the doctor. And because I told him, no, God told me not to take any pain meds. So he was looking at something. And then I told my wife about running for Congress, you know, what God had said. I told David Hernandez and some of the others, and they're like, what are you doing, drugs?
So you're right out of the surgery thinking about running?
Right out of surgery. Well, yeah. I heard his voice.
Yeah.
So second day I went to the LOCA event. Yeah. You know, the parental rights with Lucina and all them. And they're all like, what are you doing here? I can barely walk. I'm all patched up. So anyways, I pull papers. 5 days later, Congressman Cardenas announces he's not running for re-election. Wow. Now everybody's calling me. What just happened? But I never heard the voice of God say I'm going to win. What he said was, organize the churches, wake up the churches. The Catholics, the Christians, and the Jewish church, wake them up. Yeah. Because we need to fight for the children. Yes. He goes, my children. I know that I can argue with him as long as I want, but I'm not going to win. So I finally did it, and he showed I got over 65,000 votes, and there's only 55,000 registered Republicans in that district.
And only about 30 to 40% of voters actually show
Republicans,
up. Yeah. So, you know, that's a lot of votes when you look at it that way, especially the fact that we just went in at we only had days to before the cutoff date.
But I tie that back into what the LAGOP and the COGOP's plan is, you know, leave these districts alone. How are you ever going to grow them?
Yes.
How are you ever going to educate them? How are they ever going to know what's right and what's wrong?
You have to be, this is something that I talked with several other people about. You just have to be present. You have to make yourself known as a Republican because if Democrats are just going unchallenged, it just perpetuates this idea that everybody's a Democrat. Yeah, they're only Democrats.
Exactly, and you know, there's a lot of things. I mean, we're really putting it out right now because not only do we lose that position, we lose delegates. So So when somebody runs, depending how many votes you get between 1 and 5 delegates. The more delegates you get, the more say you have with the California GOP. You get more of a
Influence.
influence at the table, and so whether you win or lose, you're going to get delegates. So you still win something. Now, just the fact that you show up and you're there for your constituents saying, hey, I'm here to speak on your behalf, because there's nobody speaking on their behalf. It's like we're just saying, if what the California GOP and the LA GOP are saying is, if we don't think you're going to win, and they've been doing this for years, if we don't think you're going to win, we're not going to support you. We're only going to support people who we think are going to win. Well, you know what? A lot of people lost this last election.
Yeah.
A lot of people that you spent millions and millions of dollars on, they all lost. A couple of people, a little handful of people won, but the majority of them lost. So now we lost getting our word out there, speaking for our constituents. We are on the right side of the issues. There's no doubt. We are on the right side of the issues. But when we don't have a voice explaining to people why we are on the right side, they automatically think the Democrats are on the right side, because that's the only voice.
All they hear.
That's all they hear. So we're losing all the way around. But you know what? My husband has an experience, and you don't have to say who, babe, but you have to say it, because we're saying it. You know, it's like, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. When I was in the leadership in the Democratic Party, I knew that the Democrats were in bed with some of the Republican leadership, but I didn't know who. I wasn't at that level,
Yeah.
I'm not part of the elites, and I never wanted to be, but I knew that some deals were taking place, especially because when I was with the leadership in the unions, as an elected vice president, you got everybody who comes to you. So, we all know that, Sean Steele, very powerful man. I always had a lot of respect for the gentleman. And one day, I think it was in 2020 when I was running against Tony Cardenas, as a Republican, there was all these articles in the newspaper about a powerful politician who was facing sexual allegations of a minor that he drugged, but it couldn't be named, so they had to go to court a second time. We all went to the court, listened to the judge, and he says, yeah, there's enough evidence to be named. Who was that guy? Tony Cardenas, the guy I was running against, my old friend from high school who I grew up with, so this guy, and I'm like, wow, this would be perfect for the candidate. But as a person of faith, I said, I'm not going to put it out there until I get permission from the victim and her family. And everybody in my political advisors were thinking, you're crazy. This is not what you do. I said, I don't care what you guys say.
Yeah.
I'm listening to him.
Yeah.
That's a life that was destroyed, and I'm not going to put their information out. Yeah, exactly.
Use it for personal gain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they weren't ready for it, so I didn't use it. But I had the court documents. So we went to the convention, and Sean Steele was speaking, and the Lord tells me as he's walking out, go speak to him. So I go talk to him. We have a brief conversation. He's excited about what I have to say. So we go talk. We have a private meeting. Takes me to these private meetings. And then I told David, I guarantee you, when I give these court documents, something's going to happen. Somewhere, something's going to happen where I'm going to be sold out, and it's going to be able to expose who's really making the deal, so on and so forth. So Jordan was in the media every day because of what happened at Penn State. It was like nonstop. They were going after Jordan. Yeah. As soon as I gave him these documents, literally a day and a half after, you hear nothing about Jordan anymore. So I'm like, okay, something happened. Somewhere there was a deal. There was something made. Yeah. And I had told David, I said, see, now you get me. Something's going on. So now let's fast forward. Now we're in 2024, and I'm not running for office yet, and Sean Steele was watching a lot of the Republican leadership was watching what we were doing with the LAHRC, our strategies, and they saw us being successful. Now he calls me in to have a private meeting. So we sit down. It's me, I take David, I take my advisor with me, and, Sean is there. So he's sitting across the table from me, and he says, Benny, he says, think about this. He says, we'll endorse any candidate. He goes, we want to know a lot of the strategies and business that you use for the unions and the Democrats. We want to bring that over. He says, and we'll endorse any candidate that you run, so long as you don't run them in the LA County.
Wow.
And I said, okay, so I live in the LA County. Everyone I know lives in LA County.
Yeah, why would you not? It's the second largest city in the country.
Thank you. So think about that. I'm not going to put words out there, but I want your audience to think about that. Yeah. Why wouldn't they? I have the answer. But maybe we'll do a podcast later. Maybe some people will respond to this podcast and give me the reasons why. Yeah. But so what we did was we ran 10 candidates. I said, thank you very much for lunch. We got up and walked out. We ended up running 10 candidates with the LAHRC with no support whatsoever from the parties. But we were very successful. We didn't win the seats, but what we did win was we flipped so many Democrats. We flipped so many, and we got a lot of the independents to come out to vote Republican. That's why you don't ignore these grassroots candidates, these communities that are 26, 30 plus. Well, who cares?
Yeah.
Educate them.
Yeah.
And I think that they're only that like 26 or 30 plus because of a point that you made. They don't hear Republican messaging as often.
Oh, yes.
And I think across the board, especially when you're talking about Latino communities, we match like 90% our values match with Republican values,
yes,
especially
for
if we're
sure.
practicing
Yes.
Christians and Catholics, which
Yes.
most Latinos are.
Yes.
So,
Well, LA is the eye of the beast.
yeah.
LA is where all our focus has to be in California. As far as I'm concerned, LA is it. You know, once we take LA, the rest is domino effect. In fact, the majority of California is red. But when you hear this about what he said, and you see that the establishment doesn't want to run people, it all ties in. It's very telling to me. I mean, I don't care whether I run or whether I don't run or whether my husband runs or not run. It doesn't matter to me because I look at it as we're doing the Lord's work here. We're uncovering, we're putting light on what is evil right now. And when you're saying that you're not going to run people, there's something very wrong because you know that you're still going to get delegates. You know that you're still going to get your message out. You know that you're still going to, be able to start winning people over little by little. But if you know what, you know that if you don't put anybody there, you're never going to win that. And the intention is not to win.
Yeah.
Because you can't tell me otherwise, because nothing else that they would say will make sense. It just doesn't make sense.
So here's what I'm assuming, just obviously so basically Republican leadership is in bed with Democrats and what
Some of the leadership.
some of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
But what's and just, obviously the thought that comes next, what's the benefit that these Republican leaders see from engaging in this manner, from allowing their own party to just fall behind?
Well, let's just talk about immigration, the border.
Yeah.
Have we had the opportunity to fix that as Democrats? Yes. Have we had the opportunity to fix that as Republicans? Yes. We've had control of the House, the Senate, the presidency, both parties.
Yeah.
Why hasn't anybody fixed it?
That's true.
Because it's an issue that it's to control your voter base. So we finally have a president who we know has not been loved and embraced by his own leadership, the Republican Party, but he loves America.
So he always puts America first. So
Always.
So it makes me think then it goes back to that theory about the uniparty, that both parties are they're very similar. They're different on paper, but at the end of the day, they kind of operate in a very similar way.
Yes.
And kind of complement each other in that way. And
I look at it this way. I mean, because I think because my husband tends to say more like they're both the same, no difference, and I'm not on that. To me, I feel that there is a difference. The difference is that the Democrats infiltrated the Republican Party,
Gotcha.
and so whether it's Mitt Romney, what's his name, Dick Cheney's daughter,
Wife.
Liz Cheney.
Liz Cheney.
Yeah.
Like these are all Democrats. Okay, they
Yeah.
infiltrated the Republican Party, and there's a lot more of them. And so to me, they are different. When you're a true Republican, you're faith first. You're always faith first. And when you talk about our forefathers, they were very deep, God-loving people.
Yeah.
And so to me, there is a difference. They're not the same. And when you look at, the Democratic Party from the very beginning, and we were talking about, the Civil War, and we're talking about how the Democrats wanted to keep their slaves, and it was the Republicans.
They started KKK.
Yeah, they started the KKK. So it's evil from the very beginning, okay? Now we can go on. People want to talk about a switch. Okay, the switch is ridiculous. Okay, if they're talking about when President JFK passed away, and how what was the president after that took his place? Johnson took over. And so that's when they were passing the Civil Rights Act. Who voted for the Civil Rights Act? It was Republicans.
The people who filibustered.
There's no switch there.
It was Robert Byrd.
And when you talk about the women's vote, who voted for the women's vote?
Yeah.
So over and over, it's always the Republicans. So no, I don't think they're equal. The difference is the Democrats have infiltrated the Republican Party, and that's what we need to talk. We need to talk about the way it really is.
So I'm glad you're bringing this up, because I've had this conversation with several other people in the party, and you see it expressed as people who call themselves just fiscally conservative.
Yeah.
But they accept everything else, right? And I've had this conversation where I don't think you can actually be a Republican without also being socially conservative and having those social conservative values based on Christian values.
Yes,
Agreed.
yes.
Agreed, 100%.
And, we have, say, for instance, we talk about the log cabin. The log cabin has been, I guess the chartered in with the California GOP. And that's all fine, whatever. I'm not against, I don't hate anybody. As Christians, we are commanded to love everybody, even our own enemy. And again, we all have family and friends in the community. So it's nothing to do with hate. The Bible says what the Bible says. We go by
Love
what
the
the
sinner,
Bible.
hate the sin.
Yeah, exactly. The Bible says what it says. If you want to know what it says about homosexuality, read it in the Bible. Okay, that's what we're going by. Now, when we have gays against groomers, posting things against, about grooming children, they're very vocal. They've come out to these protests or marches that we're a part of. And they actually go out with their dress on and their high heels on, and they stand with us. Log cabin, I don't know where they're at. I don't see them. Maybe they were there, but I've never seen them. I've never seen them post anything about leave the kids alone or anything.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what we're getting out of this relationship. But like, if you're going to let somebody into your home, you're going to tell them these are the rules, and you're going to support what we're saying, what our values are. Yes, there's all kinds of conservatives, that have differences, and that's fine. But when it comes to certain values, especially protecting our children, that's where you just draw the line. You let kids decide this when they're older and they're mature, not when they're in starting in kindergarten and you're having drag queens read to kindergartners perverted books.
Yeah.
This is just so wrong. And you can't be changing our children's sex and changing their names and not even telling us. And if we have, as parents, have a problem with it, and we're saying don't do this, now you're gonna make a law that says that if we don't agree with this, that they're gonna take our child away. It's like
honestly, it's authoritarian.
It is.
It's like Brave New World-ish, where they have the Brave New World. They set it up where the child is born. They spent the first 7-8 years of their life being indoctrinated.
Oh yes.
And then it's like you're manufacturing a child, and we're getting closer and closer to that, basically.
Yeah. And
let me tie COVID into this.
Yeah.
Right, because I was a LAUSD employee. Right, I was one of the most vocal voices in LAUSD, standing up for parental rights and the children. Now, the voices that were out there with me were people of faith. So I honestly believe that when COVID and the mandates came in, here I am taking care of my dying mother at home. I'm on a long-term leave of absence, caring for my mother. I'm getting threatening emails from the district, back and forth, that if I don't go back, I'm going to be terminated, so on and so forth. I have 29 years in the service, in service with LAUSD. But what I noticed was that when they did the mandates, by doing that, they knew people like myself and people of faith, who were the people showing up to the meetings, keeping them from pushing their leftist agenda on our children. That's how they eliminated us, because we were going to stand on our faith.
Yeah.
So a mass majority of the people that did not get the vax, people like myself, are people of faith.
Yeah.
So now you had no opposition. So all these positions that were open, they brought in all these indoctrinated young people from the universities who just want the paycheck, who have been brainwashed, who are now pushing the agenda.
That makes so much sense, because I try to interview the president of the Santa Ana Unified District. He's 24. He's the president. He's super far left.
Yeah.
He's basically just parroting AOC talking points.
Yes.
He canceled the day of the interview. I was driving out there to interview.
Wow.
He canceled day of.
Well,
Yeah.
that's not surprising, but you can apply that to everything, though. You can apply that to our police force, to our military. it's just about everything that really controls our country, that has where our government puts a lot of money into. Because when you're talking about the elementary schools, they're brainwashing them with all this garbage. When you're talking about the colleges, they're brainwashing them with all this garbage over and over. So Trump is right in taking the monies away. He's doing what he can. And we have probably 2 generations that we're going to have to get through in order to change anything. And when I'll take this back to the Bible, like you're saying, how long is this going to take? 4 or 5 years? Well, according to the Bible, things are going to get bad, and there is going to be it is going to be an end. Will it ever get better? According to the Bible, it's not going to get better. Okay, so all I can say, if you're a person out there, you better determine how you're going to live your life, whether you're going to live a godly life or not. That doesn't mean because the Bible is saying that there is going to be an end, that doesn't mean you don't stand up for what's righteous. That doesn't mean you don't stand up for the children or the elderly. We still have to take a stand, because it could be 4 or 5 years. Maybe things may change, but maybe it may not change for 200 years, or maybe the Lord will come before then. Who knows what's going to happen? But we cannot give up the fight. We cannot see, this is my theory. My theory is the evil's always going to be there. It's never going to go away. And they're going to find a way. So the fight is going to be forever of our lives. So for forever, we have to be able to start teaching our kids from a young age, our grandchildren, our nieces and nephews. We have to have these conversations with them before the schools do, because the schools are going to do it. They're getting paid to do it.
I think what you're saying right now is really important, and it's really prophetic. And I tend to, I try to do this once a day, where I just open my Bible and read a passage.
Yes.
For the last 3 months, and I kid you not, it for some reason has always fallen either in Jeremiah or Ezekiel. I don't know, my Bible's messed up, but those are 2 very dark prophetic
Your Bible's
books.
not messed up.
But and I see so many parallels between what Israel was experiencing then and what we're experiencing now. And they went through it 300-400 years.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of it came from walking away from God. And it's exactly what we're seeing happen culturally, politically, in every facet of our life, right? And it's God allowed them to do that, but at the same time, it's not that He punished them. He's like, you guys are going to suffer the consequence of your own actions.
Yes,
and we're starting to see that, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
and that's where I go into when she touched on the log cabin. When they were going to try to charter them, I spoke up and I spoke to the face leaders. I said, I'm just going to tell you based on experience. In my experience, when I was with the Democratic Party and the unions, what was the downfall of the Democratic Party and the unions? It was when it was just gay and lesbian back then. When we brought them into the picture and they allowed them to participate, to take positions of leadership, before you know it, they took full control.
Yeah,
I said, so it's a downslope. It's a slippery slope. So if you let this happen here in the Republican Party, the same thing is going to happen. You're going to see that slippery slope, and this is what we're faced with today.
Well, and I'll tell you, with Benny's campaign, we worked with so many churches. We went after the churches. I'm telling you, we spent a lot of times. We had this little pamphlets of all the bills that were being passed to transgender your children and take your parental rights away. All the bills that his opponent, Luce Rivas, voted for. I mean, we hit the churches. We put it, big time. We hit the churches in a major way. And so we are not shy about any of this. We are not being afraid of any of this. And this is what people have to do. But you always have to have respect. You have to be able to, try to hold your anger, your frustration, because we're human. And so, again, with the Hispanics, by nature, they are conservative. The majority of them are faith-based. One of the things that the Hispanics have to realize, though, with this illegal issue is that, in the Bible, it says to obey the laws of the government. When you're coming here illegally, you're not obeying the laws of the government. And so on top of that, I'm sure if it were the other way around and we went into your country where you and your family for generations spent a lot of money of your tax money pouring into health care, your retirement. And so if people from a different country went into your country and started receiving all these benefits, and now your governor is telling you we're running out of money.
Yeah.
Because we're giving this money to other people who never put in. You know, as a Hispanic and as a person of faith, this isn't right and it's not fair. And so for you to be angry and to continue as like you're entitled or you deserve, you know, if you look at that Bible and you read it, what you're saying is not right and it's not according to God's word. It's not, you're not living a righteous life.
And here's my biggest fear right now is we have candidates who run under the banner of the Christian flag or the Catholic flag, a flag of faith, right? And because they think every election is about monies, they're compromising. So they're getting endorsements, let's say from the log cabin.
Yeah.
So I made it a point to point out all those candidates in this 2026 election. Because if we continue to do that and support these type of candidates, I'll tell you right now, the Republican Party will be just a shadow of the Democratic Party within 4 years.
Yes.
So I give it 4 years.
So how do we solve this? Because this is a conversation that's actively happening in the party, right?
Yeah.
And I often feel like there's a fracture happening in the party. How do we solve this, right?
Well, you first of all, you have to call out the people that have been hiding in the shadows. And that's why we're doing it on the radio show, on the AM 870 radio show, where my wife is a co-host with David Hernandez on the podcast. I've had this information for years, but I waited on him above to tell me when. And it was about a year and a half when he put me in the hospital. That's when it was like, you need to speak out now.
Yeah.
Because yes, I'm speaking up against powerful people. I've had death threats all my life, you know, but I'm still here only because he's not done with me. I don't fear death. You know, I tell her, you know, the last second I take my breath. What I'm trying to tell every candidate now, especially when I ran, and we had this little division even within our own little club, I said, either we're a people of faith or we're not. We can't have foot on both sides. So if we're going to have support, we're going to put our money, our resource behind a candidate who then is going to get the endorsement of the log cabin that goes against our values. What do we stand for then?
Yeah.
You know, who are we? So that's where we're at now, where the people of faith are coming together. Salt and Light, a bunch of the other organizations. We have a pledge. We're coming out with our pledge. Any candidate that wants our support is going to have to sign that pledge. Because at the end of the day, I don't know if we're ever going to change it. To be honest with you, I haven't heard anything like that. I do believe we're living in the end of the last days. And I tell the candidates, yes, you want to win your election, but don't compromise your moral values. Because remember, if anything, you're here to save souls. Guide people to the truth. Yeah. And then when you lead them to the truth, they're going to vote for you, but they're also going to have him.
Yeah.
And what's more important, make sure, try to build that relationship with him versus you winning a vote.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of candidates are seeing the shiny object of the worldly things and forgetting that they're serving him, right?
Yes.
Yes. You know, I think it is true though. I don't know if you could say call out or educate. You know, I think you know, like Benny says, that there's a lot of candidates running and they're just running just to get the shiny object, like you say. There's no depth behind it. And what's going on is very profound in our country and just the world. It's not just here, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And so, you know, really it is about the Lord in the end. Really, you know, you could believe or not believe. I'd rather choose to believe and maybe there not be a God than not believe and then there end up being a God. So you can look at it how you want to do it. But really, no matter what, these Christian values really create a better life overall, I think. But really, when it comes down to it, is that we cannot pretend that what is not going on. When you see people, they're doing things, you're like looking at them and they're saying that they're Christians, and you see them, you know, either vote for candidates that don't share our values. One of the things I do also notice is that a lot of people, even the people that are like when we go to these conventions where the Republicans are, you know, doing their conventions, a lot of them don't understand really what's going on, that the corruption in our party, they don't understand. They think because, you know, we're under the GOP umbrella that everybody is, you know, God-fearing, loving, honest people, and they're not. A lot of them are undermining what we're trying to do, and they're undermining the Constitution, America. They're like I said, you know, we have people who have infiltrated our party, and that's what people have to understand. The other thing is that I notice a lot of people, when we bring them in, like to LAHRC, like even we weren't really talking about it because, you're trying to be PC, politically correct. You're trying to just, and not no more. It's like no more. We cannot afford to do this anymore. We cannot afford to be politically correct. We have to tell people when they're running, listen, understand, we have people at the very top that are not really genuinely trying to look out for our best interests. They most likely will not support you. They're probably not going to give you any money. They're not going to canvass for you. They're not going to make phone calls. Why is that? There's no reason why. Because if they can have the college Republicans go if they pick 3 people that they want to put out there, and they can call 50 people from the college Republicans to go canvass or make phone calls, why can't they do that for everybody else?
Yeah.
What difference does that make? There's when we go out and canvass, if we have overlapping districts, we canvass for everybody in our group. It doesn't. There's no extra work we have to do other than get an extra flyer in our hand and deliver it.
Yeah.
Or make a phone call. If we're calling for one person, but there's an overlapping district, there's nothing wrong with adding another name to it. So why can't you do that with the college Republicans? They offered anything. So that tells you a lot. So when we're trying to explain to people, when people are they're falling in love with these people that are at the top, thinking that they're the saviors, when really in reality they're really not doing anything. And a lot of it is getting the discussion out there, getting the truth out there, getting people to understand what's going on. Why are we not winning? This is why we're not winning. What I'm explaining to you, when you're not running candidates in districts, how can you win? You're never going to win. They gave up.
Yeah, you can't give up on those districts.
Yeah.
It's more important. It's like, it's like the gang intervention prevention programs that we run. We could have just gave up and said, let them kill each other, but no, we're going to get involved. We're going to get in the middle of it. We're going to try to educate these young men and women. We're going to give them opportunities, but for example, my brothers and I, for the past 40 years, we use sports as a means to keep kids out of gangs. We get no funding from the government. It's out of our own pockets. We buy their shoes, their gloves, pay their fees, take them to practice. We train them and then we compete in front of the Division I, Division II schools, and they end up getting a scholarship, partial scholarship, 40% academic, and then, athletic, whatever it may be. But this gives them an opportunity to have that chance in life, and it's the same thing here. You can't give up. Unfortunately, we are human beings, right? We do get to a point where your bodies and mind can only take so much. Yeah. And that's where I'm at. You're actually the first podcast where I'm going to mention this. I'm letting California know we got until 2026. After that, we have no commitment to staying here. Yeah. We committed to stay until the 2026 election. And if things don't turn around, we can only do so much. Yes. And we're at the point where we're banging our head up against a wall where we're just going to have to move on to another state and try to save that other state. I won't say where, but...
And that's such a common story nowadays. There's so many people who have become disillusioned with California and just how far off the cliff the state has run. And it's almost like there's so many people in the state who are just willing to live in perpetual illusion of what they have, because the state is so beautiful. You can go to different parts of the state and it looks great. And you can completely avoid all the madness that's actually happening. You can completely avoid the fact that the governor just lied about, we mentioned earlier about benefits for illegal immigrants. He said initially it was $9 billion, then found out it was $12 billion. Yeah. How the state's going bankrupt, the city of LA is going bankrupt. You can avoid all of that, right? So it's definitely sad to hear that people like yourselves who are so talented, so involved, and care so much about this community are thinking about leaving. But it's such a common story nowadays, and it just shows that unfortunately, our state's getting to a point that we're already losing the best talent we have, and we're just what's gonna be left?
Exactly, and I tell those of you that are not involved in politics, and if you can stay. Their goal is to get rid of us. We're not leaving because we're sick and tired of all of that. We know of a state that is purple right now that I do believe that if we went over there with the right messaging, we get the support from some of the leaders there, that we can protect it. We can keep it red. Yeah. But we're not getting that support here in California. So that's why we're being vocal about who we're fighting against. And if people don't want to stand up and speak, that's fine. You've made your choice. But people like us and other leaders, because we're not the only ones, We're going to move on. We're going to move on and try to use what little energy and resources we have left, take it to a different state where leaders who want to fight. Because here, the people in power, they don't want to fight. You know, and I hope President Trump gets this message because he thinks he's got a lot of support from the people in the leadership in California. Come on, they didn't even want to endorse him.
Yeah,
and it's so crazy that you bring that up because I've spoken to donors. California donates more money to the Republican Party than any other state, and we see the least money back.
It goes all over to every other state.
They need to stop sending it to the LAGOP and the CAGOP, and they need to give it directly to the candidates that they feel they like. It has to go directly to the candidates because, unfortunately,
it's spent on consultants.
Only a few handful of people get any money, and the rest of us have to just figure it out on our own. So, if anybody's going to donate money, please do not donate it. I hate to say this, but don't donate it to the LA GOP or the California GOP. Donate it directly to the candidate that they like, that feels that represents them. Because at least then the money will get directly to them, and that's what candidates need more than anything. Candidates don't need a big amount of money. They need enough money to order signs, to order flyers, to do some social media little commercials. And, that this is the biggest challenge. So if anybody wants to help, that's the way to do it to me.
And let me touch on that. I would say if I were the party leader, if I was the LAGOP or the CAGOP, chairman, I would be very, very honestly, I'd say every candidate that gets beyond the primary, they should at least give them $5,000 for those that are endorsed, the endorsed candidates going through the primary, and at least $10,000, a minimum of $10,000 going through the general. Why do I say that? I received over 65,000 votes, 8,000 in the primary, about 9,000 in the general. So you're looking at about, what is that? $17,000. So $17,000, 65,000 votes, but we did knock on about $50,000 doors with about 15 volunteers. We were out there every day, and we talked about just the issues. We focused on low propensity Democrats. We focused on independents. And the party and the other federated groups and all that were supposed to be making the phone calls to the Republicans because it's sad when Republicans don't come out to vote. 25%, 28%, 30%, that's ridiculous. It's no wonder why we're in the situation we're in. And then when less than 50% of Christians vote, so that's why God told me to organize the churches.
So why do you think, I mean, we talked about why so many Christians aren't coming out to vote and aren't engaged and how that's changing. So what about Republicans? Why do you think there's such low engagement with Republicans, and how can we turn that around?
I think it goes back to what we were talking about, where our party is not engaging them. We're not running candidates. So they don't even know that they're there. They don't understand why, because most of these people are working. They're tired. They have kids. You think, most people are at work 9-10 hours a day between, their lunch having an hour. So there's 9 hours at work. If they're driving a half an hour back and forth, maybe an hour back and forth, that's like 10, 11 hours. So they get home, they don't want to watch news. They want to enjoy part of their life. And so nobody's engaging them. Nobody's telling them why life is difficult for them, because you're working so hard, because you're having to pay so much more for a mortgage now. You're paying so much more for rent now. You're paying so much more for utilities. Why is this happening? Because the representatives, the people that are running our state, our politicians, are allowing everything to become so expensive. In California, we pay double of everything, double gas. I mean, when we went to Texas, to Tennessee, gas is half the price. Homes, are like half the price. Everything's half the price. And it has to do with our politicians. Democrats have been in charge. The state assembly and the state Senate have been in charge since the 1970. Okay, they've had almost a majority. There was like a little portion of time where there was Republicans, but for overall, it's been Democrats that have ran this country. And so we have to change that. We have to stop electing the same people, because if they wanted to change something, they could, because they are in complete control of everything, and they don't want to change anything.
I have a little different perspective. Because your question was of the Republican Party. And she's absolutely right when it comes to the overall voters. But when it comes to the Republican Party, in my honest opinion, when I was the leader in the Democratic Party, when I first met David, I didn't know David was a Republican. All I know was that somebody who was out there who said, I'm willing to help you.
Yeah.
You know, and then through having conversations, so on and so forth, I realized the guy was a Republican. But when you have the Republican leadership, even the current leadership, who ignores these blue districts, people feel, I mean, like for Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club, we go out there, we had an event at Pacoima, let's say, let's go back 5 years. We didn't even know you guys exist.
Yeah.
Like nobody knows Republicans exist. And when we actually, pulled the numbers years ago in the 29th Congressional District, we realized how many, almost 26% of the registered voters were Republican. I'm like, wow. And when you look at the amount of votes that these individuals that running for office have won with, if we got 80% of just those Republicans to vote, we could flip some of these seats. But when the leadership is totally ignoring them, when the leadership is saying, just leave those districts alone, we're never going to win them. Why are people going to show out to vote?
Yeah.
If the leadership is telling them, just leave it alone, ignore it, it's going to continue that way.
So do you think there's an aspect of that? And then do you think some Republicans also feel a little defeated because of how we're portrayed in media? How, there's so much negativity around, like people see Republicans, Democrats have done, and I hate giving them credit for anything, but they've done a terrific job really villainizing Republicans around the country.
Yes, you're right. But my message to every Republican, are they over your shoulders when you vote?
Exactly.
No.
Yeah.
So you know what? You can play it safe all you want. You have your business to protect, whatever, for whatever reason you want to be out of the light, that's fine. But no one walks into that booth with you.
Yeah.
Or no one is in your room when you're checking the box when you get the vote by mail. But vote.
But I think you're correct, though. I think you're correct in the sense the media is bought and paid for. Okay. Then you're talking about the entertainment industry. They're all Democrat. Again, there is a system that goes on there. You got to get into their little club to make it high in their little system there. And, when you talk about, oh my God, I just forgot. But it's true. It's like everything's here. What I was going to say is that all the money is behind the Democrats. They have the unions. They have the big movie stars. Now they even have big corp. Because big corp used to be a Republican thing. Now they even have big corp. They have the social medias, like the Facebook,
the Googles,
all of them. Yes. That's all behind. I mean, let me tell you, the Democrats have done a terrific job of being able to get them all on their side. And so I think a lot of people are seeing like all of this, and they're like, well, should we be on the Republican side? The only thing that's happening that people are seeing is that their money's disappearing. Their livelihoods are disappearing. Here they're siding with all their quality of life is disappearing. There's riots every time you turn around, especially here in LA. Every time you turn around. And so they're seeing it. And Hispanics, I guess a couple good things that I should say is Hispanics are waking up. You're talking about 45% of male Hispanics voted for Donald Trump. 45. The other thing is the youth are waking. The male youth are waking up. They overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. Blacks. Donald Trump won almost in every category, from what I understand. He upped every category except with white educated women. Every category. And so people are waking up. It's not that they're not waking up. They are waking up. And this is probably why the Democrats are fighting so hard to keep these illegals here, because they see them as their potential voting bloc. So that's why, and on top of the reason why they're fighting, because there's going to be so much corruption exposed. There's so much corruption between the January 6th, what happened with January 6th, and just all the money that they're receiving from the NGOs, all the money that they're getting probably from everywhere. There's going to be so much corruption found that they have to do everything to make everything difficult for Trump, to keep him so busy that it's going to be hard for him to do what he needs to do.
You know what's very interesting is that, speaking in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, there's a lot of nonprofit NGOs out there, right? And the money's a revolving door. And it's no secret, when I decided, when the Lord pretty much said, you're going to run for the 29th, I understand why he picked the 29th Congressional District. And I tell people, the Northeast San Fernando is the power base of the Democratic Party. There's where a lot of money, the positions, the future, the president of the future is right there in the 29th Congressional District. And that's why, I don't know why my alarm went off.
Oh, wait, maybe your car.
Oh, the car, yeah, but I moved it back over there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so all right, we'll leave it. Yeah. Where was I at?
You're talking about San Fernando Valley being
Okay,
the heart.
so so it being the heart of it all, you know, and I'll say this. When we talked about the gang violence, right? When you talk about if we solve these issues, no money will no longer come into these districts. Well, here's what happens. If we have kids killing each other, then our elected official can go to Washington, D.C., which they do, and they get $10 million a line item to dues for gang prevention intervention. Now, this nonprofit organizations, I'm not going to name them, you know, they receive this money. Every staff member gets the highest pay, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, 80% of the money goes into overhead and staff. But when it comes back for reelection, not only does the staff member, but their wives also have to make the maximum contribution. So the money goes like this. So when I've been asking, my threat was that when I went for Congress, I'm going to do exactly what Doge was doing. I'm going to do a forensic audit on every nonprofit organization and give an accountability to how your monies were spent to expose the corruption. So that's why they're angry, because they're going to be exposed.
That's so good that you brought up that point, because it operates on every level, right? I even saw recently it was exposed that there was this fundraiser for the Palisades fire. They raised $100 million, and the money all went to an out-of-state NGO, and they, I think 80%, like you said, was also administrative fees, and all the rest of the money, they didn't do anything directly. They hired other NGOs to do it, which did the exact same thing. So the money disappeared.
It's horrible. People need to stop. You got to donate directly to the people, directly, because that's the best way. Because you have to know who
like GoFundMe.
Because you cannot trust all these organizations anymore. All these organizations, all they do is make money for themselves, and they just take a cut. You know, just do it directly. I don't trust anybody anymore. I don't trust doctors. I don't trust our government. I mean, after COVID, I don't want my grandkids to get any immunization. I don't want no shots. I don't want anything. In fact, I'll figure it out first. Unless I'm gonna be dying or I feel like I'm dying, I'll call on you when I really feel like I'm dying. Until then, I'll figure out all the home remedies, natural path. I'll go that route before I call a doctor, because I don't trust anybody anymore.
And I think in the spiritual realm, I know you'll understand this. Not all are called. Not all are called to be servants. You know, not all are called to be leaders. We all have a different level. You know, but I think we're at a point in life right now where people of faith, you got to stand up. You got to stand up, you know, and I want to say this because I want this to be part of the message that goes out to the audience. And I hope if anything they walk away with this. You know, right now what's going on in the city of LA, it's devastating. I'm not going to lie. I'm a man, but I was in tears this morning because I was just in prayer like, you know, God, I feel something very evil that is about to drop on us. Evil. And I know usually when I get these feelings, something happens, you know, and here I am watching on TV. I told her today, I don't want to hear no more news. I don't want to watch it anymore because I hadn't heard from my two sons in a few days, both LAPD. Yeah. You know, and I'm like, what is going on? Here you have people in Los Angeles who are throwing rocks and bottles and spitting and flames and everything else at the men and women wearing blue who are our children. Yeah. Those are our children. Those are our brothers, our sisters, our aunts, and our uncles. These are native-born Angelinos who courageously are putting on that uniform to protect you and to protect me. And this is how you treat them? This is what angers me. That's why today I said, I'm not to watch the news anymore. I said, I'm getting so angered, I want to get in my car and I want to go over there. Yeah. But I know I got to let God be God. Yeah. God has a plan. He's working on something. Let me sit back. So if anybody who's out there that's on the opposition side, just know your fight, you're coming against our children. You're coming against our family members. Yeah.
Well, I mean, when it comes to something like this kind of issue, they literally have a network of anarchists that are ready to go and just go and filibuster or cause violence in these kinds of scenarios. By the way, I do want to take a moment and thank you for your two children going out there, going in harm's way, because I've been down there and I've been seeing what these protesters, I hesitate to call them protesters. To me, they're just, from everything I've seen, they're rioters. Yes, they are. And they're just using the issue of immigration as a blanket for their anarchy.
Oh, yes.
So that's really what it comes down to. And I've seen so many police officers, LAPD, CHP. I've seen the LASD. So many of these officers standing for hours on end, hot sun, in that uniform, which isn't easy, getting verbally abused, having, like you said, rocks, being put in harm's way, all for just doing their job. And when you break down the numbers, when you look at the overreaction, how much they've destroyed of downtown LA, how many officers they've harmed, because there's several videos you'll see of officers getting hit with rocks in the head and all this other stuff. For about 150 people who were arrested and had criminal records. They're not picking up people, as far as what I've seen from the administration, what they said is that it's people with criminal records who have been arrested.
Warrants.
And have warrants, exactly. People who we can all agree shouldn't be here in the first place because they're here illegally and they're criminals.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of fear-mongering and misinformation that's going around. And, I do think we have to give these LAPD officers what, the due that they deserve, because the messaging that they're getting from the top, from Newsom, from Bass, and from the LAPD chief as well, it's not helping them.
No, it's not.
And it's making them just be, they could be, I know they could be more proactive, but they're being forced to be reactive because of the leadership. And that's just causing them to see more harm than they should.
And my biggest concern is, what are the long-term effects going to be?
Yeah.
I deal with, I help a gentleman now who runs Blue Dogs, and he trains, he's a, former police officer, detective, went through the ranks, but he realized the emotional trauma that a lot of these officers go through, they're going to keep it inside.
Oh, yeah.
So he trained these dogs that can actually sense their emotions. So when the dog rubs against an officer's leg, they know there's something going on. And then this officer is actually able to take these dogs home with them, or they do to spend some time with them to kind of get over whatever it is they're dealing with emotionally. But what they're dealing with today, it's at a whole different level.
Yeah.
Because they're throwing gas bombs at them.
Oh, yeah.
And
fireworks, mortars.
And I almost think in a way that they are allowing our officers to be abused, so that way they will want to quit. Because they don't want to fund them anyways. They look down on our officers. Karen Bass, Gavin Newsom, and the Democratic Party, the majority of them, they look down on our officers. And I think they so many have already quit because of through COVID. So many of them quit. They left early, they retired. Because of all the chaos and all the corruption that was going on. Right now, we have such a corrupt government. And the only way it's going to change is if people stand up. People got to get involved in the elections. I think I hate to say our elections are kind of probably fixed. That's why we have to get more involved, because they are fixed. It's like we have to double down, not retreat.
Too big to rig.
Yeah. We have to double down. We cannot give up. And I think a lot of people are getting tired and they're getting worn out. And so they're moving and they're quitting and retiring. And it's like, either we're just going to let California just fall in the dumps, or we're going to have to double down. And
if you can't save the state, help fight save the nation.
And I really do think we need to hone in. LA is the key. Once we win LA, the rest of the state will be great. We have to get rid of this governor. We have to get a real conservative governor, not one of these sort of lukewarm Hilton.
We need a Jack Guerrero.
We need somebody like Jack Guerrero. Yes, I mean, we need to really stop. Everybody's like, well, they're the best of the, I guess, the ones that are being put out there. But it's like, we keep lowering our standards. We need true conservatives. So we really do, because we keep getting stuck with these lukewarm Arnold Schwarzeneggers, and it's like no more. We need a true conservative.
We need somebody who's going to be a governor as a Republican, not somebody who's going to be elected as a Republican and then just go along with whatever the Democrats do.
Absolutely. And that's why, we really had high hopes, and I've been praying for Jack Guerrero because if you
Yes.
think about it, Jack Guerrero, has no support from the leadership, and it's not his fault. He stood his ground, and I know that because I was at the table with him when it happened, and that was when Patterson, we were at the Hispanic 100, and you got this guy Mario Rodriguez that everybody thinks he's a voice for the Hispanics. No, he's not. No, he's not. He's a sellout. I'll say it on your podcast. It's a shame that the Republican Party has him up there as our voice. I'd love to sit at the table with him and have several conversations because first time I met him, he tried to tell me how I was going to vote, that we're going to vote and support, Jessica Patterson. I'm like, no, I was behind Travis Allen at that time. I said, and that's when David was with me and Jack Guerrero, and we all stood our ground. We did not let the party dictate where we're going. So now you go to 2020. Jack Guerrero runs for, treasurer, for state treasurer in 2020. You know the budget he had? Little over $40,000.
Wow.
You know how many votes he got?
How many?
Almost 5 million.
Amazing.
Think about that. In 2020, when Republicans weren't liked.
Wow.
Right? So now you have the low-hanging fruit. Jack Guerrero is a guy.
Yeah.
Jack Guerrero is a guy that if he were to do this, and if not him, somebody like a Sheriff Villanueva, somebody who's proven to not be a puppet of the party politics. And I just wanted to kind of share that with your audience, but I don't know if it's too late for a person like Jack Guerrero, but if it is, if it's not, let's keep praying. Hopefully God will give us somebody that we
pray
can support.
that somebody that is a true, real, deep down Republican. We really need somebody. We need people to run. If you have some passion, you care about your communities, we need people to step up and run.
Like Oscar Martinez, who's running for LA County
He's
Sheriff.
running for sheriff. Yes.
Yeah. Win or lose, like I said, you're still going to get delegates. You'll be a delegate, so you're still going to win. Because you're getting your message out. And a lot of these people, it takes 2 or 3 times to run sometimes in order to win. So sometimes, you don't go in with the thought, I'm going to win. Sometimes you have to go into, I'm going to just make a difference.
Yeah.
And when you make a difference, you win. So to me, you still win. But it's very harsh out there, and there's our country needs a lot of prayer, and it needs not just prayer. Like I said, prayer without action is dead. That's what it says in the Bible. We need people to actually do something, get involved, whether it's, get behind candidates that have your values, whether you just donate money, whether you donate time to canvass, make phone calls, text out their flyers.
On that point, she made a very good point for your audience who doesn't want to knock on doors, who doesn't want to go to an office to make calls. Candidates can drop off precinct sheets at your house with the already prepared message. All you do is text it from your phone to the list of numbers there. It's got the message, the flyers, everything from the candidates. We had volunteers coming in who were, later these women were in their 90s, and they didn't even know how to do this. We had to set it up on their phone and show them. But they were doing it, and they were able to put out, I think it was about almost 100 text messages an hour.
It's actually actually much more. We got a lot more progress by just texting rather than calling. So, and a lot of people would rather just text because some people, they would rather not be kind of having a charging conversation with somebody.
Of course.
You don't want to be challenged.
So, and the other thing is, if you want to get involved, the other way you can get involved is through our LAHRC, the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club. We have meetings in Woodland Hills every 4th Thursday at 6:30. If you want to know more, you can go to the losangeleshispanicrepublicanclub-dot-com, I think, website. And we always have our information there. You can join. All our handles are on the website. If you want to join Instagram, X, where we have them all. And we always have all the flyers because we always have a lot going on. We have like a lot of events going on. If you want to get involved, we don't care if you're a conservative Democrat.
You don't have to be Hispanic.
You do not have to be Hispanic. If you go to our meetings, they're fun. Sometimes we have potlucks. Sometimes the club will buy the food. We always have a great speaker, and we have a great crew of people, a great board members.
We have a plan of action. It's not just meeting. Yeah.
So we have. So if people want to get involved, a lot of times people they just don't know what to do, where to go.
Of course, where to get started.
And that's why we're going out into the communities now. We're going out every month. We're going into a community. We're there. We have all our people there. We will help, get people registered to vote. We, just everything. We
have plans of action.
We're getting involved with the youth and the community to let them know that we are here. We are supportive of you. We are supportive of the nuclear family, and that, it's okay to be normal the way the Lord made you. It's okay to be the boy or the girl that the Lord made you. You don't have to feel like you have to be somebody else. And
just know that you are not alone. Republicans, you are not alone.
Yes.
And we also have the radio show AM 870
every
Saturday nights from 7 to 8. And sometimes we get extended an hour.
That's
you really
amazing.
want to know what's going on? We talk about all the issues. Our club is not under the Republican umbrella. So, we're able to speak on anything we want to speak of. Anything
beautiful.
you want in closing?
No, you guys are so good at this. I usually have to tell people like, anything you go to promote, you already did all of it. You did all my work for me.
That's not even an eighth of what we have, brother. Let me tell you.
I feel like I could keep talking to you guys for like another 2 hours, but they're busy people. So we're going to wrap it up. Anything else you want to throw in there?
All I want to say is, hey, keep our law enforcement, our first responders, our military in prayer. Keep our president in prayer. And don't get stuck on party politics, please. Don't, remember, if you're a person of faith, he's the one you don't want to offend.
Yeah.
You're going to offend some Republicans and some Democrats, and it's human nature, but don't offend God. And when you do, acknowledge it, ask for repentance. But at the end of the day, whatever you're doing right now, just lead people to Christ.
Yes.
Because the time is coming. The time is near, and that's what I like to leave with.
And then I think I agree with David. Stay in constant prayer. Our country, our world needs prayer. When you go to sleep, pray. When you wake up, pray. When you're driving in your car, pray. And try to always do something nice every day for somebody. I think we need to just be nicer to each other, because a lot of us are very frustrated. We get on the freeway, we're frustrated. We turn on the news, we get frustrated. So, and it's difficult because it's a really tough time right now. So let's all just try to be nicer to each other. And always let the car in front of you in. Just let them in. Open the door for somebody. Say good morning to somebody.
Do something good. Is what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
We're out of time. So,
Mary Ann, Benny, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. You guys are amazing. I look forward to seeing all the good that you guys do.
Brother, we appreciate this opportunity. Anytime you want us back, let us know. We are busy, but we'll always make time for you and your audience.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
God bless you, brother.
you.
God bless you too.